Shane, what is the crack, my man? How are you?
I am good, my man. How are we doing?
First of all, thank you very much for being. Now, I know this is my second guest that I've had on, but you are my first to be published. So thank you for being numero uno.
I'm very honored. I'm very honored. When I got the text in or the DM, it reminded myself of myself when I first started doing the podcast. It's like it was leading with generosity and chancing your arm, and I was like, I love it. So let's do it.
It's something that like when we spoke about, like you said it afterwards, after I kind of like, I'm not going to say bribed you, but I flattered you first of all. It's like, if you don't ask, you don't know. And I said back to you, it's like, it's something that I've always learned kind of, because my dad would be going into Curry's or Harvey Norman back in the day. And he's like, is that the best you can do? It's like, if you don't ask, you don't know.
And I think that's a Dublin dad's thing, because my dad does the same thing. It's like, I'm going in for a whatever it is. I didn't pay full price the last time. I'm not paying it now. It's like, you full on paid the last time.
It's like, is Stephen in? I was dealing with Stephen the last time and he gave us the discount.
Stephen's not, doesn't work here anymore.
Yeah. There was never a Stephen. That's all right. Shane, for anyone in Ireland who does not know who you are, I've obviously kind of done an intro before this, and just say they've been living under a rock or they don't have access to a podcast. Who is Shane Walsh?
So where do I start? So Shane is an online coach who predominantly works with females and female fat loss, works in around PCOS, amenorrhea, getting and moving away from the slimming clubs, yo-yo dieting element side of things, and education on cycles. I'm the owner of Shane Walsh Fitness. There is another coach, Dallas, who works with myself as well. And we're currently hiring for another coach, which is amazing. I never thought that would be the day. The host of the Shane Walsh Fitness podcast, which is available up on iTunes and Spotify. And I've had the likes of Jay Alston, Brian Keane, Darren Cartel, Natalie Lennon, Rebecca O'Rourke. There's so many different names. I've been very lucky. And I think episode 150 is going out next week, which is incredible. It's madness. But yeah, that's my small little spiel.
That's your elevator pitch.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your Tinder profile.
That's my Dragon's Den.
Yeah, for sure. There's so episode 150, like that's kind of a big deal, like kind of. And when you first started recording, did you have any idea that it would go to 150, even past 5?
I didn't think it would go past 1 because I recorded the first episode off my mobile phone upstairs.
I listened to that the other day.
And you could make a drinking game out of the amount of times to say yeah, it's not amazing. It's one of those things that I remember getting the feedback from some of the people that I was working with at the time as a PT, and they were like, this isn't gonna last. I don't know why you're doing this. I was like, well, I have to start from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It can only get better. It can't get any worse. And I was like, if I try get to 15, 20 episodes and it's still not for me, at least I tried and gave it a go rather than trying not to do anything.
Yeah. And it goes towards like kind of your first anything is always going to be shit.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I think most people are just afraid to try anything because they're afraid of failure. Like I would have been happy enough to say, right, got 10, 15 episodes, 20 episodes and have known that it wasn't for me if the podcast wasn't for me. But I was set a challenge by Brian Keane at the time, was like, if you get to episode 20, I will come on the podcast. And I remember getting a message from him at episode 10 and he'll come on episode 11. I was like, all right, he lit the flame. He knew exactly how to push my buttons and he came on. He's been on 3 times since and I've been on his and it was, yeah.
Speaking of Brian, like kind of a great influencer of the two of us, like, and someone who we kind of like, he's almost like on a pedestal, but he's a normal bloke at the same time.
He's the nicest bloke you're going to meet. Like, and he's open to giving you a hand and not expecting anything in return and bouncing ideas off him. I was only talking to him yesterday and bouncing an idea off him and he was like, well, this is what I would do about it. It may not work, but this, you're looking for X, Y, and Z. I was like, never thought of it like that. It's just, he's walked the walk and that's why I kind of go for him. But I think the reason my story with Brian, I think I spoke about it a little bit when I was on his, that in 2017 when I got very, very ill with 2 blood clots and fluid on my lungs, I fell into a very, very dark place mentally. And I listened to Brian's podcast. I never listened to a podcast in my life, fell across Brian's. And there was one sentence on that podcast that stopped me from doing something very, very stupid, which was ending everything. So wow. I will always say to Brian that I don't think he realizes it. But that's why I kind of like, if anyone says anything about anyone or anything about Brian, I'm kind of like, well, you don't know the full story.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like well, through speaking to yourself, like, and kind of other like lads like Paul and other, just even kind of normal people in the fitness industry, not necessarily coaches. Like, no one has a bad word to say about him, and it's about finding these. I'm not going to use the term unicorn because he's not a unicorn. He's just someone who stands out for being a top bloke.
Just gives a shit.
Exactly.
And that's lacking in the industry.
Yeah, there's too many people who are there for you on a surface level, but when shit hits the fan, if the weight's not moving, you're struggling with your diet, you've had a shit week, they're not there.
No, and I think there's too many people are. If cookie cutter plans kind of are a different thing, and meal plans irk me. If they're for like a 6-week, 8-week holiday, fine, like go for it. But the weight's going to come back on afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather have a slower solution for a client and have them not have to lose those same 5, 10, 15 pounds over and over again and drive themselves crazy for that. And I think that's the bit that I think the likes of yourself, the likes of other coaches, that's the bit that makes them stand out, and Kareem will always rise to the top.
Always at that. And with that, I think this is probably a relevant question to ask you. What do you feel of the state of the fitness industry right now when you mention kind of cookie cutter meal plans?
I think there's two extremes.
Yeah.
I think there's no moderation realistically for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people, there's a lot more eyes on social media at the minute. There's a lot more ears on podcasts. And I think people have, like, we've all been there at the first bit of lockdown. We're all trying to like get through it and doing loads of online classes, and there's nothing wrong with them at all. Because I tried to do them. My body just didn't want to play ball with them. So I had to stop doing them. But I think what a lot of kind of like the fitness industry promotes is extremes.
Yeah.
And that's what sells. And moderation and slower approaches don't really sell. Because when you think of when someone goes onto a diet, they almost want the diet to end straight away. And that ultimately leads to failure, leads to frustration and putting the weight back on.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be wanting to get off your diet straight away. You shouldn't be wanting to stop training. You shouldn't be wanting to stop eating wholesome, nutritious food majority of the time. And it's about finding a balance. And balance for one person, for you, Dean, will be potentially balance completely different because you're a parent. So balance for you will be very different. Balance for me, who hasn't got a kid. So it has to be a tailored approach to a parent. It has to be a tailored approach to, say, someone who is in a relationship. Can they incorporate a kind of a date night or whatever like that to get through a lockdown? Or how are we going to incorporate getting the kids involved with the workouts or going for the walks? Because ultimately what you do in front of your kids is going to have a knock-on effect for them when they're older. We're talking off air about it.
Yeah.
Like if you show up more often or not, you're talking about yourself in a positive light, you're not having this yo-yo dieting effect or whatever it may be. That's ultimately going to have a massive impact on your kids' environment. And I think what's happening now with lockdown and the whole thing of people getting out for steps, your kids are going to remember that when they're older and knocking that onto the next generation. And that's huge. Getting out for steps, helping your mental health, getting out for energy, setting a routine. Your kids see things. They pick up on things. Like if you were to curse, your kid will pick up on that.
Yeah.
They don't always pick up on the negative things. They pick up on the positive actions and positive reactions that you bring in yourself.
Kids are, like, it's the term that I came across, like kids don't learn, they absorb. And I do think
like
it
sponges.
Was, yeah, I do think it was like the godfather of the fitness industry, Jamie Oliver. I do think it was him that said that. Kids don't learn, they absorb. So whether you're arguing, being loving, dieting, training, the relationship you have with whatever it is that interests you, kids are going to absorb that. They're probably going to take it on. Like you might see someone whose dad was a mechanic. The kid generally might go down that same road because they're just seeing their dad around cars, around mechanical type things, figuring things out. They may not end up being a Dublin bus mechanic like their father, but they may just be mechanical minded.
Exactly. And I think it's important, like if we have a skill and you're willing to teach someone about it, I think it's important to be able to try and educate. What's the saying? I think it's like, if you tell a man how to fish, he'll keep coming back. If you teach a man how to fish, he will learn and be able to provide for his family. And the same thing it provides when it kind of goes to weight loss. If I can impart any nugget or any part of what I've done, and like I've done stupid shit with my diets.
Same.
Like I've done stupid shit. And like,
what's the worst you've done?
I went gluten-free, dairy-free for a very long time, and I can't really process a lot of dairy. but I went proper and cut it out, and then introduced it back in, and I was like, why? And I went gluten free and was like, okay, I can still eat these massive bags of crisps and they're not going to have any impact. Like, I didn't understand what calories deficit was or any of that stuff. But I've done extremes training silly amount of times, and just like, no, I don't need to train as much as I did. My body couldn't recover. Like, if your body, particularly for girls, but lads as well, like if particularly for girls, if you're training a lot and you're tired all the time and you're having a lot of PMS and a lot of tiredness all the time, there's a sign there that something is a little bit off, and we need to like address that. Because if you're not getting enough sleep, the psychological, the hunger issues, everything knocks on your mood, and then you're wondering why you're picking aimlessly at certain things without recognizing your triggers. Because when you get tired, we always go back into our lowest form of training, and the habits that we've had for a very long time creep back in so quickly. They're hard to create, but they're so easy to go back into.
Yeah, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, and when you are tired, you fall back to default.
Yeah, it's because it's easier, and your body's looking for just the quickest way, and it's why we kind of reach for more carbohydrate, kind of sweet foods. There's nothing wrong with those foods, but your brain is just looking for the quickest hit of food. It's like when you're hungover, you're looking for like more carbohydrates or a pizza or something. There's nothing wrong with those foods, but your brain's just looking for an instant hit, and that's where it's going to get it from. And then you're going to be hungry 20 seconds later. You're better off trying to have like your 3 meals and 2 snacks a day if you want it. You're better off having more fruit, more veggies to fill up your stomach. You're better off having more protein and drinking water, like the unsexy stuff that no one really promotes.
And it's hard to sell that. Like, it is hard to sell that because like there is extremes, as we spoke about already, like kind of where it's like, don't have X, it's bad for you. Whereas when you and I kind of try to approach it from our more holistic, inclusive thought process, it's a harder sell. But once you get someone around to that, it's like, boom, light bulbs go off. I can have X, I can have Y. There's no such thing as bad. There's no such thing as good. It's just food.
Yeah, I think people, when they say, I can't have this, I can't have this, it's about changing the phraseology or the wording and saying, I want to have this. I want to have this to kind of bring an emotional attachment to it. Like, or I'm having this because I can eat with my kids. You shouldn't, if you're a mom or a parent, you shouldn't have to cook a separate meal for your kids. That's not what this is about. And I think when some of the clients in the penny drops, they can have the same meals as their kids, it's huge. And it makes the whole thing of the diet being easier. Like, it doesn't need to be chicken and broccoli.
No.
I've done chicken and broccoli for a photo shoot. I did not enjoy the process. Felt miserable, libido, energy. I was tetchy. I was horrible. Wasn't sleeping. It just wasn't, I would not recommend to a friend. And not that I'm totally against those diets. If you're going for a shoot and you need to cut, or a bodybuilder, then there's a place for it. But John and Mary down the road,
no.
When people hear diet, they think chicken and broccoli, they think no chocolate, they think no crisps, they think no carbs. And you're like, no, that hasn't worked before. Why is it going to start working again?
Yeah.
Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again.
I was just about to say that.
And expecting different results. Like, it's just not going to happen. And I think a lot of people go back to the old reliable or go back to slimming clubs. And there's nothing wrong with slim clubs if they work for you.
Mm-hmm.
But majority of the time, slimming clubs is a reason why 88% of people fail on slimming clubs. And that's from the MD of one of the slimming clubs. That's not me making up that stat. I think it's hugely important for people to say to themselves, right, if I'm cutting out this food, why am I cutting out this food? Why am I cutting out carbs? I enjoy carbs, so why am I cutting them out?
Yeah.
Like, there's no logical reason other than to tell for a piece of plastic to tell me that that's working. But then if you're miserable psychologically, you're not going to be able to sustain it. And that's a huge education thing, and the system needs to be brought into place. The education system's improving. It's a hell of a long way to go.
Yeah, I think that people need to be told less what to do, more so why to do it and why
it's
they're
like
doing
the fisherman analogy. You have to educate the person how to eat and how to fuel their body. And that's the big thing that myself and Dallas do with the girls in particular is how to try and bring them away from looking at the scales all the time, trying to educate them how to work around their cravings, trying to educate them on when to push their training so that they can get the strength up and get the glutes or the quads or whatever it may be up. and then educate them on saying, right, if you just slept or let your phone out of your room, it's going to have a massive impact. And you do that for a little while, things build up over time. It's like building a house. Get your solid foundations first, brick by brick by brick by brick.
Yeah, it's a compounding effect of like little habits, little changes now that kind of come in will gravitate and multiply and become something way much more, or become an identity that you eventually graduate into.
100%. And I think the identity thing is a huge thing, because I think a lot of people identify themselves by their diet, in that I am my diet, I am keto, I am whatever it may be, or intermittent fasting. Something that Dean does may not work for me. Something that I do may not work for Dean. And it's important to say, right, work with the person that's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
What have they done before? What hasn't worked for them before? Could they just try as simple as 3 meals and 2 snacks? If someone is, before we were coming on, I was designing a program for one of the girls who's starting with me, and she's a runner. Her program is going to be completely different from someone who has a good bit of weight to lose.
Yeah.
So it's about working with the person, analyzing the person, working with them on hunger, all that kind of stuff, fueling strategies about running, and actually educating them on like tweaking little things. It's like she was saying that she was potentially getting a little bit of cramping, and I was like, okay, let's try and increase the water a little bit. Let's try and get a little bit more X, Y, and Z vitamin into you. And
Yeah,
it will change it. It will change over time, but I guarantee the cramping will probably reduce. And I think small little tweaks can go a very, very long way without going like kind of like running into the wall, which a lot of people do when they go for a diet.
yeah, and like it's that shows shit at the wall, kind of something will stick, but sometimes something doesn't stick, especially if it's the wrong wall you're showing shit at.
But I also think it's important as a coach to be able to say, right, let's try this, and then say, right, this hasn't worked for whatever reason, or if the person or the client, could you maybe change the terminology that you've phrased it to them? Could you learn a different way to phrase it to the person? Because it's hugely important that if you may, because we know the sciencey stuff, it's important that we work off analogies and say, right, calories in, calories out, it's like spending money or whatever, maybe something like that. But if they're not getting it and you're able to reverb it off, you need to take a pause back as yourself as a coach and almost say, right, hang on, why is this person not getting it back? And don't be afraid to say, is there any feedback? Is there any questions you have? Is there anything that you're not getting? And being prepared to say, no, Shane, I'm not actually getting that. And then changing tack or learning and going researching, is there any other analogy you can go? And there's an amazing book, The Art of Coaching, I think it's called. That's a really good book for learning the different types of kind of clients that kind of come through the door on a daily basis, and understanding what types of information can go with each one, and then you can tailor it to the client that way.
Yeah, so something that I've said to, like, in particular, like PTs that are coming through the industry, like early in their journey, is if you can't simplify it, you don't understand it.
100%.
Yeah, like if you can't simplify, like I know we're speaking, like we're in the industry a while, like, and we can definitely take the law of thermodynamics, like TEF, everything else, neat, all that crack. We can simplify that to like layman's terms, and the client, like Mary, John, blogs, whatever it may be, they're like, I get you. Yeah. But if you can only address it like calories in, calories out, that's all. And like, what? Come on, I need more.
Yeah, I think generally from when you're working face to face, you'll get the blank look. When it's a little bit online, you kind of like, you're not getting this. So we kind of say, right, is there anything I can tweak in what my analogy is?
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, now I get it with the kind of the calorie spending. And then I think a lot of people are also afraid to, some people, when they have, say, been going on 800 to 1200 calorie diets, it seems to be the way that a lot of people go towards because they're extreme. When you kind of give your client or recommend your clients to go for a certain amount of calories, if they are counting calories, they're almost afraid to go for that number. But you have to be able to say to yourself, why are you going for this number? Because you're not really eating this amount. You're saying you're eating this amount, but your results and your body, your overall mood, or everything like that isn't doing that. You may be doing it Monday and Tuesday, but by Wednesday you're having 3,000 calories for the rest of the week.
And the law of averages is like, it's going to bring you into a surplus over the course of the week.
Exactly. And what we try to do then is try to bring up your calories a little bit more on a daily basis if you feel hungry. And that's the important thing, is if you're feeling hungry, aim for your 3 meals, 2 snacks, have a little bit more if you need it. But it's also being able to say, and kind of removing the guilt from things if you overspend one of the days. press and reset and educate on that one. And it's like, well, did anyone die?
Yeah.
And it's like, and more about it as a sense, I hope no one died, but I think that's also important. But I think it's saying to stuff like it's important to say to them, right, press reset, no one died, let's try and go again. Because what can happen a lot of the time is if they, as Paul Dermody says, pressing the fuck up button, or the more poetic way of calling it is the what the hell effect, which is when you've had one less nutritious meal, well, I might as well throw everything out. Yeah. It's like the car analogy of if you have a flat tire, you don't puncture the rest of the tires.
No.
So why would you do it to yourself? You have a choice in what you want to do. You have a choice of, I've had one less nutritious meal on a Friday, well, I'm just going to press reset on the Saturday. That's if you want to do it.
Yeah.
It's also asking, you have to lock into your why as well.
Yeah, like, and you have to want it.
Yeah, you have to want it, but I think a lot of people, they think they want it, but they don't understand necessarily why they want to do it. I think a lot of people do it for external reasons, for external gratification.
Yeah.
And I've been there, so that's why I'm talking from that. I did it for the wrong reasons. I was like, I'm going to do the photo shoot because I want to be accepted in the fitness industry. And when I did the photo shoot, I was like, I'll be happy when I have 10% body fat. I was miserable. I gave up 90% of my life for 10% body fat. And I realized that, right, there has to be a balance here. There has to be a way for me to educate. I'm glad I did the photo shoot because it made me realize that there is a way to not, this is me crash dieting. So my clients, I can use the terms that are the thoughts that I've had here and help the clients along the way. Would I do it again? Potentially, but I wouldn't do it as extreme as I did it.
Yeah, you'd approach it from a more of a
not do 10-week crash. Yeah,
no, not at all. Like you do it for 20 weeks and it'd be slightly less extreme.
Yeah,
and I think that's, extremes are easy. The messy middle is what's hard. And I think I heard that on a Chris Williamson's podcast, who I know you had on. Big props on that one. He is, in many ways, I think he's one of the most underrated podcasters in the game.
100%. When I chanced my arm and got him on and he said, yeah, I was like, okay, something's happening here. But he was an absolute gent, and we were talking about kind of sobriety and stuff. And I haven't drank in nearly 4 years, just out of choice for mental clarity. I just don't want to do it. And he hasn't drank for a lot of the lockdown because he's worked in nightclubs and owned nightclubs and promoted nightclubs for a lot of his life. And the extreme is, let's go out and get shit-faced.
Yeah.
But when you talk about alcohol and you talk about drinking, it's kind of like, well, it's the only drug in the world that you get stigmatized for not taking.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was kind of like, okay, but I think it's important to, like, that's an extreme of sobriety and going out in the piss all the time. And either side is an extreme. But a lot of people struggle with, I'm just going to have 2 drinks.
Yeah, and 2 drinks is never, let's be honest, it's never 2 drinks.
No, it's not. It's like when you go out for a pint with the lads, when you could go out for a pint and you come home, you go out on Monday and come home Thursday. It just doesn't happen.
It doesn't. Like I haven't drank in going on 7 months. I'm 7 months now. Since the week before my little lad was born, I said I'm done. And it was not for health reasons, because obviously there are health benefits to not drinking alcohol. It was more so I don't want to be hungover or kind of intoxicated over the limit if he needs to be brought to A&E. If he needs to be brought to chemistry. Like, so that's my why. It's not even a selfish why, it's his why.
Yeah, mine's a selfish why, just why I don't want to go back into my bad place where I was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I just can't, like, I couldn't do what I'm doing now if I was tired or hungover. I wouldn't be able to give the clients the attention. I wouldn't be able to give Dallas the attention. And I wouldn't be able to have the people around me that I wanted to. My creativity would be blocked, my energy, my training, my state, my sleep, everything would be knocked on. And if my sleep is off, everything is off.
Are you a sleeping nerd now?
I'm an absolute I'm a SWAT. I am an absolute SWAT.
For those that are listening that aren't from Ireland, SWAT means nerd. It's just an Irish term. Is that actually an Irish specific term?
SWAT? I don't know. I'll research that word. More research. No, sleep, genuinely. It's so.
Was it the Matthew Walker podcast?
Matthew Walker, and I interviewed Alan Flanagan, the nutritional advocate, and he did an episode on sleep, and I was just hooked. And my biggest thing that's tweaked since March last year with lockdown was taking my phones out of my room, getting a second phone for work. I will not look at social media after 7. I will not look at my phone after 7 p.m.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's actually really impressive. Like, and it's something that I try and I do struggle with, and I'll hold my hands up. I'm actually embarrassed looking at my screen time sometimes.
Like, don't get me wrong, during the day, my screen time can be up,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of like, well, like, I have an app called Freedom that's on my phone majority of the time, and that will block off the apps that I don't want to use between certain times. And if I try to go into them, it will block me out and knock me out, so I can't go into them. The
Nice.
only way to uninstall it, or only way to kind of knock out the app, is to uninstall Freedom.
And instilling a barrier of entry there.
I'm still in a barrier, but I'm also protecting myself and my state. Like, if I go to bed quite early, my PT body clock, I go to bed quite early. I want to wake up early so that I can either go for a walk or else go reading first thing in the morning. And if my energy is off, those two get impacted. And if I have one of those non-negotiables each day, I've won the day already, no matter what's thrown at me.
Yeah, definitely. And it's about, that's actually bringing me on to the next question I was going to ask you. What non-negotiables do you have? Because I did a podcast on this there during the week, what my non-negs are, and what I kind of, I'm not going to say preach, but I advise my coaching clients to instill some non-negs into your life.
Yeah, so I use a kind of a system, kind of like the 5 Fs. So focus, fitness, finance, fun, and family.
Nice.
So each year I will kind of go towards setting a goal for each one of those elements. Because a lot of us right now have, like, work is the main thing. Fun isn't high regard, or whatever. Family is neglected, all this kind of stuff. So it's about having potentially 20% of each marked off in your life, or it could be 30%, and some other ones that could be a little bit less. Setting a target for each one, and then setting 90-day goals towards it. And then I'll check in with myself every week. Am I getting closer to that 90-day goal? Every Sunday I'll sit down and say, am I getting close to that 90-day goal? That's my non-negotiable on a Sunday, is to plan my week. If I don't plan my week on a Sunday, I'm already playing catch up if I do it on a Monday. So I'll look down. It takes 20 minutes. 20 minutes is not a lot of time.
No.
I look down and say, right, did I hit my goal? I have my whiteboard beside me. These are my goals for each week. I've got 3 of them left for the rest of the week between now and Sunday. And I'll tick off as they go along. Once I know, and they're all for different quadrants of, like, if it's a business one, it's like how many clients are coming on or how many clients are finishing up. If it's to do with family, am I cooking dinner? It could be a date night or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in relation to fun, ringing the lads or texting a mate? That's one of my big things at the minute, is making sure I am checking in on that. In relation to focus, am I getting out for a walk every day? Am I doing journaling or meditation each day? And it's important. And then fitness, break it down. So rather than saying I'll break it down for a 90-day goal, I'll train 36 times in 90 days.
Yeah.
So 4 times a week. Okay. Or so that's 3 times a week. So 48 times. And then that's rather than saying I'm going to train 7 days a week and never train again.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a consistency versus intensity.
Yeah. So if I know that if I have only hit 3 sessions on 1 week, well, then I'm kind of like, well, what happened there? What did I kind of say to myself? What was the thing that kind of not allowed me to do that? Yeah. And we'll always do what we value more. So potentially that week it was like I had more podcasts, or I was a little bit more tired and my sleep went off. So it's about analyzing and kind of saying, right, something was off here. Don't beat yourself up. You just tweak it and then learn from that lesson, move on, throw it under the rug and go.
Have you always been that self-aware?
No, absolutely not. When I had a real job, as I call it, when I worked in sales and recruitment for 5 years, I was never that self-aware. I was unhappy. I was living off someone else's life and someone else's values. And that was what was directing me down the path, but it was a path I didn't want to go down. And then once I kind of realized I was self-employed, I was kind of like, right, there's something that some people are doing that I want to mirror. I need to figure out what that is. And I read a book called Tools of Titans, which is Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss has a massive podcast. So Tools of Titans is scripts or synopsis of his biggest interviews. And each single person out of those, so he's interviewed some of the biggest names in fitness, some of the biggest names in acting, music. Jamie Foxx is one of them. And the biggest thing that they nearly all say is a morning routine. I was kind of like, right, there's something in this. Like Mark Zuckerberg has a morning routine. He'll lay out the same outfit every morning so he can get into it, and it takes the energy away from, so he can be creative. It takes the energy away that he can just put towards Facebook and all that. And it's important that if you have a routine, that there's something going on, and then once I look back and say, right, there's a direct link between where my headspace is, my podcast is, the finance stuff is, getting an potential coach, my training and my energy, relationships, family. This direct link between that is because I have that non-negotiable of that morning routine.
That's actually nice, and that kind of comes across like decision fatigue. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's what he calls it. Yeah.
I might have been on a Tim Ferriss podcast. I heard that, and I was like, Jesus Christ, that's massive. Like the banisters in our landing, it's just full of my clothes. Like always, like when I go to bed at night, it was like, right, grand, take the clothes, boom, boom, boom. Like, to be honest, like it does my wife's head in. She's like, for fuck's sake, the landing's in bits. I was like, but they're my clothes. And I tried this, like, but Tim Ferriss said I have to do
this. He's broken up a lot of marriages.
I'd say so. Like when you turn to your wife and said, we're going to have a 4-hour work week. And I was like, yeah, in your dreams. It's like, that doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. But like I've that book's above my head, and I definitely took something out of that, which was just kind of like stack the same tasks together.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to do them intermittently throughout the months. The biggest thing for me was the finance stuff in relation to the accounts. I was doing it little and often and trying to save it into everything. I was like, well, that's taking me this time, so why not try to do it at the end of the month and take me an hour and a half rather than trying to do it all the time. And I think that's something, you take something away from a book all the time.
I think if you can take one thing from anything, it's always a bonus. Like, because you've learned one extra thing, like whether that's going to, like I went to what's it called, UPW, Lisa Power Within, Tommy Robbins. I went to one of those events there a few years back, and I was like, right, I'm paying a few bob here, but if I can learn one thing here,
you got your money back.
I've got my money back, because I can carry that into, whether it's in my own life or whether it's in a coaching perspective. Like, I can go ahead and take those tools. And also, the person that comes out is never the same as the person that goes in. The person that starts a podcast is not the same person that finishes a podcast.
No, and I think it's also important that if you do go to, or you are reading a book, and if you are going to one of those events, it's important to apply what you've learned, because it's too easy. I've seen it a lot, and I've been guilty of it, is that you're always looking for the next thing. You're looking for the next book. You're looking for the next course rather than trying to apply what you've done. I've been guilty of that before when I used to do the kind of like the PT courses over in the UK. You go to them to be seen as the PT rather than trying to actually apply the information. You maybe quote the information for about 2 weeks and then never bring it in with your clients. Yeah. And then you look at the notes above your head now and you're kind of like, well, that makes a lot of sense. That's liaising with this client. And it's just funny little gems that you'll be able to bounce off. And I think it's important to have people around you as well that you can bounce ideas off as well. I think that's hugely important. And surrounding yourself with those, because something maybe your wife has said to you, potentially you can relate to a client, potentially a female client, because she'll have a different understanding of something.
Yeah.
And she'll be able to relate it to herself. So that would be like, bring the empathy that she's shown towards herself, and that could be a lesson for one of your clients that way.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that kind of since becoming married and since becoming a dad. I've definitely gravitated and been more, I'm not going to say attractive, but more kind of the client of choice, or the coach of choice, to more married women, married men, or just parents in general. And it's
shifted, I'd say, from where you first started.
Massively so. And you're probably the same. Like when I first came into the industry, I wore a mask. And I've spoken about this, like whether it's on social media or else in an email, I wore a mask early on in the fitness industry. I was like, I am who I think I need to be, but I was fucking miserable.
Yeah.
As a coach,
by someone else's values.
100%. I was like, I have to be the lad that trains athletes, trains people to get super ripped, super jacked. But then as I became a little bit more mature, like I was in the industry when I was 20 years of age. So I was almost 21. I had a job in the industry in the May of my 20th year. And I was fucking miserable because I was wearing a mask. I was pretending to be somebody who I wasn't.
Yeah, and I can relate to that with the photo shoot. And I remember when I first started, I was coaching lads. My first 2 clients were lads. They were housemates. And I was like, I'm going to get lads jacked. And then I was working in the gym floor, and a lot more girls were coming because they were doing the classes, and I was teaching classes mainly to pay rent in the gym that I was in. And I was like, these are asking questions about certain things. These are asking questions about something. And then something just clicked. I was like, well, these are asking the right questions. Well, there's my content. There's the podcast. There's a book idea or an ebook idea or an audiobook idea. There's these people are giving you what they want. They're telling you what they want. and it's up to you to kind of build something to match that and try to lean towards that way. And then like the biggest thing is not really caring what others think. And I think that as you said, the mask thing, you're afraid to go by what you want to do because people are telling you not to do it. I remember, like, the lads still give me a bit of abuse. They're like, "Oh, Walsh, how's your menstrual cycle?" And I'm just like, I'd say the same things to the lads. It's kind of like, well, it's important to kind of know what you want to do, and there's a direct link from what I wanted to do to something clicked.
Yeah.
And that's with the podcast, that's with the business, that's with how how I feel overall. Because I wasn't happy to being the kind of like, I know when I first started, I was a cookie cutter. So I've done that. I've made the mistakes. That wasn't the approach for everyone.
Sam.
And I think once you kind of go and you learn those lessons, you slowly become what you actually wanted to become and what you actually want to do.
Yeah, I've made all those mistakes, giving out cookie cutter plans, and then you get educated and you realize that no, there is a gray. It's no black and white. There is a gray with coaching, and it's like, and even when someone inquires now, and this is just because of how used to, I think, and how accepting people are of cookie cutter programs. So like, Dean, is there no meal plan with this? I was like, no way, Jose. Like, I'm giving you spending money, calories. Spend them how you wish, but I'm going to educate you on how to spend them. I'm not going to tell you what to spend them on, but some things are going to serve you better than others.
Yeah, there's sometimes a little bit of bite back when you get a DM and they're kind of like, well, why don't you do meal plans? I'm like, well, you've done them before. Have they worked? And they're like, no. Well, then there's your answer.
Great comeback.
But I say it in a less dickhead way than I've just said it. But it's that kind of mentality. So I'm like, well, if this hasn't worked for you before, it's not going to start again. So
definition of madness.
I think a lot of people just want that instant gratification. They want that instant hit rather than showing up. There's days when you don't want to show up, like genuinely. But I always ask myself, will I feel better for going for a walk, or will I feel better for going for a session? And if I'm sitting here and I know I've got a session in, say, 5 minutes, well, then I'll be like, right, I'm going to count to 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'll get up. And then I'll go over towards the spare room to do a session. It's like the lines are blurred at the minute. It's like, it's not the same as the gym. Don't get like, and it takes a little bit more desire, because I'm not going to use the word motivation or willpower because I think they're buzzwords. It takes a little bit more give and go, or a bit of a kick up the arse to actually go and do it.
Yeah.
But I just know my mental health will be a hell of a lot better if I do that. And that's my why. People's why can be body composition, people's why can be mental health, people's why can be energy, whatever it may be. But I think it's hugely important to have that why. He or she who has a why will overcome anyhow.
Oh, wow.
That's by a German philosopher called Nietzsche. And there's an amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So I've
heard that book.
Yeah. So Nietzsche said that. So I think it's, once you have a why, you'll and something is thrown at you, you'll still continue on that lane. You may have to take a different path, but you'll still get back onto it's like I compare it to having a GPS and you're going to somewhere you don't know where you're going and you take the wrong turn. It's about getting back onto the track using GPS, or going back onto find the same route to where you want to go. And it's the exact same thing.
I've used the Google Maps kind of GPS kind of reference a lot with my clients. There's like kind of without Google Maps and GPSs are useless without
direction. You have to tell it where you want to go, and they'll give you different options how to get there. They may be subroutes, and you may pull off to go to get some snack in a petrol station or whatever. But ultimately, it will lead you back into that direction. You're still going down the same lane.
Absolutely, that's massive. There's I think we do have a very, very similar kind of coaching style / approach. Like, we're very kind of understanding that we're more than just a PT, and I do view you as more than just a PT. Like, we are educators, we're everything else, and that's actually the title that I have for this podcast, is being more than a PT. And how did you find the transition going from an in-person coach to an online coach?
Ooh, good question. I've never been asked that question. I think it was difficult at first, because I don't think it was difficult in relation to when you are face to face. You know, you have your sessions from X time. Your day's planned out for you. When you go online, your days aren't planned out. No. You need to create the structure for you, and it's also important for not being a busy fool. You need to say, like, what is my day? Like you can easily sit behind a laptop for 12 hours a day watching cats play piano, genuinely. But I think once you have some sort of small goal for each day, so like today, I was getting new clients signed up and advertising the new job. That was the two of them are ticked, and then have the two podcasts today. They were my three things for today.
Yeah.
For business wise, and then my fitness goal today is go out for a walk.
Nice.
So things are being ticked, and it's whatever time it is. But the big thing with kind of coaching difference is that I think you have to do the face to face in order to be online, because it's very easy to want to be this coach that kind of wants to live the lifestyle and go over to Bali or Thailand or whatever. But I think you need to do the graft and do the hours, recognize what people, how they're moving, and be able to say, recognize their form. So like before we were coming on, I was drawing up exercise videos, and then my clients send me over form videos, the ones that want to, and I will record a video or to a screen recorder off my phone or off the screen on my laptop, and I'll look at them doing the form and give them direction. But if I hadn't done my time on the floor, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I'd be like, well, try to squeeze back your shoulder blades a little bit more. If you're doing lat raises, you're emptying 2 jugs. I wouldn't have been able to get those cues if I hadn't done the silly amount of hours on the floor.
Yeah.
And I think it's for PTs, it's very similar to when people are looking to lose weight. They want to skip step 1, 2, and 3 and go straight to step 10.
Yeah.
And I think it's hugely important. Don't get me wrong, there's some very successful coaches that have never done an hour PT in their life.
But I think those people are ones that have been on the gym floor for a long time themselves.
But training, I would say, because I'd
Yes,
say they probably genetically more advanced, either through the likes of steroids, or they just could be genetic monsters or hypo responders. And people buy into those as well. And I think from doing the hours on the floor, it also allows you to read a person a lot better. It allows you to understand and have a little empathy towards a person. And right, if this person's tired, actually build a conversation, build a rapport. Because I don't like being the Billy Bootcamp coach. When I taught classes, I'd shout at the top of my lungs. Yeah. But if I was teaching a client, they were like, "You're very gentle." I'm like, "You're very different to your classes." I'm like, "Yeah, but if I started screaming at you right now, that wouldn't get me very far." And they're like, "Yeah, well, that's the attitude." And it's like, you're human. You potentially haven't slept. You've had a stressful day. I have to understand that. So take it into your account. If you haven't said to me before your session that I'm feeling tired, or I've had a shit day at work, well then, if you've had a shit day, do you want to have a hard session and get it out of your system? Or you're tired, right, we need to scale it back and just kind of do the maintenance. We won't be doing any high intensity stuff. Yeah. Not that you need to anyway, but
we're not going for PBs there, like.
Exactly. And I think that's huge. You know when to push your clients, you know when to push your clients, you know when to kind of ease off your clients. Like, I think a lot of people are struggling now. I've had a few clients who have had COVID, and having the empathy towards them, being able to say, right, guys, you just need to kind of like put the foot in the brakes. Now is not the time to push. Now is not the time to run yourself into the ground. You need to recover. You need to focus on kind of getting decent rest and nutrition into your body and putting you first. So what can we do to kind of tailor that, put those little steps into play? And I think the feedback that has come back generally is people have been surprised that it wasn't, no, you must do 1,000 burpees. I'm like, that's not what PT is about. Anyone can get someone to do a load of burpees.
Yeah.
But most people won't actually get to know the person. I think that's hopefully what myself and Dallas and yourself and Paul that makes us stand out a little bit more.
That kind of brings me on to the next question. Like, you've obviously heard the term like the fitness industry is saturated, and it's something that years ago I would have agreed with, but through just kind of maturing, I disagree with it. I feel, and I'm sure you probably share the same sentiment, the fitness industry is saturated with coaches, but there's a big difference between a good coach and a great coach.
Yeah, I would. There are a lot of coaches out there. Anyone can call themselves a PT, or anyone can call themselves an online coach. But I think what generally happens is people get found out. People will get, if someone has a bad experience with a coach, generally that will kind of get to 10 people. That's generally what happens with negative information. And don't get me wrong, there's mistakes I've made with clients before, 100%. And I'll never say I'm 100% amazing at anything. There's no such thing as perfection, but it's about learning from those lessons. And I think that's the difference is like if someone has given you feedback on a particular, they may not have been a fit personality wise for you, and it's kind of identifying, right, that personality fit isn't right for me. That may be suited to Dallas. I may have a gap in my knowledge on a particular thing, but Dallas may have that. I may be more suited to a certain element of a client, and I'll go with that. And I've had to have that conversation with myself, and sometimes that's not easy. And sometimes it's kind of like almost leaving the ego at the door. And Dallas has said this to me recently. It was like, you know this, the X, Y, and Z off by heart. So you need to focus on this. I know X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to focus on this. And then we have the happy medium in the middle. Yeah. And I think once you have, and that's what we're trying to do with a new coach, is trying to build them into another element of it that may be a gap in our knowledge. And I've no problem saying there's gaps in my knowledge. If the day you say you know everything is the day you're an idiot.
Yeah, completely.
Because there's so much information out there. There's so much information out there, so much rubbishy information, so many. I think the big thing with the coach is you'll know fairly promptly if they care.
Yeah, massively.
And I think that's the biggest difference. That's the difference between a coach's coach or just a coach.
Yeah, something that like that little extra. It's never crowded on the extra mile to kind of go with the old expression. And something that I found that I kind of keep doing with clients is sending voice notes, because
voice notes is the only way I'll do it. Because if you write a text can be taken up wrong.
100%.
And they may not get the tone. Yeah, but if you're sending a voice note, and one of the big things about it,
they love it.
Go ahead.
They absolutely love it because the voice note, it's just a bit more personal as opposed to like copy and paste.
Yeah, and it's also getting back to the client, which I think is a lot of people's issue as well. When they send a client message, a client sends you a message. I've had this with coaches before, is that you send them a text and then you don't hear from them back for 3 or 4 days, and you're like, well, I wanted that answer 3 or 4 days ago, and I'm paying you a lot of money, so why am I not getting an answer back? And it's not being a demanding client. It's kind of like, well, I'm paying you for a service and I'm not getting an answer for 4 days when it says on your T's and C's 24 hours. But also with about going the extra mile, I had Phil Lerney on, who's an amazing, the
legend.
Incredible. And he was saying he went that extra mile with his clients. His clients will be very high profile, be actors, be loads of different things, and be in London, so be quite higher end. And I think one of the things he said was if his client was going traveling for work, he'd ring up the hotel and ring up the gym and say, what equipment have you got? And then he'll design the program for the client that way. What food have you got in the menu? Well, this is what I would encourage you to eat. We can tweak it that way. And that just sticks in my head. It's like, go that extra mile, and that will land with the client.
Massively. And Phil Lerney and like kind of these godfathers of the industry, like, and there's probably 6 of them, I reckon, like that are just real standout. If you're going to copy anybody, or at least copy the coaching style or coaching approach, it's these guys that they've been there, they've got 20 years in the industry, like they're just phenomenal. And that kind of brings me on to the next question. I prefer training women. I just feel they latch onto the information a little bit better. They're more trusting. And I know from my experience as being a lad and my like training a couple of lads over the years, once they went read a men's health article, like they're experts all of a sudden. I was hoping you'd spit that water out when I said that. Do you share the same, mate?
Yeah, I think girls want to learn a little bit more. As a lad, I know that what we want to do is get the biceps, the chest, and all that kind of stuff. I think girls are a little bit more open to learning a little bit more information. But there's always going to be
outliers.
Yeah. That will kind of like, some don't want to learn, some aren't ready to learn, and lads will be like, I've got clients who I've had before, in that they are the quickest to ask questions, they're quickest to learn, and they throw themselves into it. It's very, very person dependent. It also depends where the person's at. If they've tried loads of different things and failed before, it's about asking the question, like, why ultimately have you failed? Have you self-sabotaged? All that kind of psychology stuff comes into it. Do I prefer training girls? I would say they're a lot more interesting psychologically wise, and they're a lot more interesting to learn about physiologically as well, and there's a lot more to understand. A lad, is kind of like can be said go A to B, but with a girl you may need to carry a little bit more steps. The nutrition needs to be different, training needs to be different. I think a lot of girls don't necessarily understand that as well. It's about providing that education to them as well.
Yeah, I think that's a massive one that a lot of people underestimate, especially like from when they're being coached or being taught to be a PT. When you're going through whatever coaching platform it is, that there is a difference between training a male and training a female. And not a lot of people, and it was only in the last maybe 5 years of my kind of fitness industry that fitness kind of coaching experience that I've like, hang on a minute, no, there is a massive difference here between coaching a woman and coaching a man.
Huge. And I think Dr. Stacey Sims over in the States, women are not small men.
That's perfect. And when I heard your podcast with that and quoting that, just blew my mind.
Like Stacey or Dr. Stacey Sims over in the States, like if you are PTing or listen to this, like go and get her book. And there's other books out there, like Lyle McDonald's, the women's volume book, and there's 2 of them. They'll change how you work around coaches. Like they're quite technical, but it's important to say like women should not train. It doesn't mean they can't train hard. It's just when they can train hard. And it's not that, it's how to work around the psychological aspects of the cravings, the PMS, the cycle, all that kind of stuff, which I don't think a lot of girls realize. And there's an education gap because Ireland, especially in Ireland, we're a little bit backwards here. We had the Catholic Church over us for a very, very long time. And the thought of, if you mentioned the word condom, you would have been burnt alive at the stake.
Absolutely.
So to talk about this whole taboo subject, a lot of the research on training has been mainly done on men. So a lot of research hasn't been done on women. So it's a new area. There's a lot more, there's changing all the time. There's a lot more taboo towards, there was a lot more taboo towards ladies training and talking about periods and menstrual cycles and amenorrhea. And a lot of ladies were afraid to speak up. And I think there's a lot more movement towards the likes of Amelia Thompson over in the UK, who's incredible, who I'd highly recommend getting on the podcast. There's the likes of Emma Story-Gordon. And there's so many more talking about and female empowerment and female cycles and female hormones and being able to talk about them and actually work with them rather than saying this, the PMS or whatever is, and educating that this is a sign of lifestyle. If you're a day late or 2 or 3 days late, there's something off with your lifestyle, your stress, your sleep is off. And it's about educating, saying like, what can we put in place so that may not happen next month, and put in those small procedures so that you can leave whenever you do leave myself coaching or whatever it may be, that you're in a better place so you can actually understand your cravings, understand your PMS, understand that you don't have to do 1200 calories and do kickbacks on a Stairmaster.
That's one of my pet peeve exercises as well.
Oh, don't get me started. That's a different rant.
We could nearly have a separate podcast, like a kind of like our pet peeves in the fitness industry.
Oh no, the kickbacks in the Stairmaster is one of those. I'm kind of like, well, I'm turning the power off so you can get off the Stairmaster.
There's I think that little kind of 5 minute, if we call it like rant, so to speak. It's
a polite word.
It's a polite word to use. Like it's something that needs to be almost spouted more. And there is. Do you feel that there's ever a bit of a pushback when, like, being a male coach, speaking about periods, menstrual cycle, cravings, PMS?
I think they're shocked.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are shocked that someone is talking about it. Like my mates find it hilarious. My parents find it hilarious that I'm getting asked to come on podcasts or getting interviewed by Image Magazine to talk about menstrual cycles and menopause. And you're kind of like, if you said that to me 3 years ago, I would have laughed at you. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But now it's kind of one of those things that I'm immune to. Kind of like it's my job.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I need to keep brushing up on because it's changing all the time. The needle is changing. There's still a bit of a taboo saying, why is a man training women only? Because sometimes when they hear PT, it's like, oh, the PT, and a woman, it's kind of like, ooh, what's going to happen there?
Yeah.
So that could still be underlying, but I don't think it matters what sex is training what sex, as long as the person is actually giving a shit and they know what they're talking about and not being afraid to kind of outsource. Like, I've got clients who I have no problem referring out to talk to someone, mental health professional, or if to go to a doctor if they're doing something, or making sure that everything's healthy and getting bloods done and coming back with bloods or whatever it may be. I think as a coach, it's hugely important to have those little support networks along the way to kind of bounce ideas off one, but also physios as well, and being able to, because they're going to throw stuff back to you as well.
Yeah.
They have a client, it's like, oh, this person needs to lose weight because they're having issues with their lower back. We're kind of like, well, they'll come back to you with those type of clients and say, well, go to Shane or go to Dean or whatever it may be. And I think, there is a bit of a taboo, but I think it's like people, it's just new, and that's all that it is.
That's it, yeah. And I think that's a sign of maturity as well in the industry and in the coaching, your coaching career, is to be able to not take offense to somebody needing help that you may not be best suited for, or like kind of like even with me, so if someone comes to me and they're like, Dean, I want to do a show. I'm like, here, you're going over to this lad. I've sent X amount of people over that way. Reason being is that, number one, I'm probably not going to enjoy coaching you, and you're not going to enjoy being coached by me, because I am not proficient enough. Will I be able to get you into decent shape? 100%. But not stage quality shape.
Stage ready is different. And I'll be saying, I can get someone ready for a photo shoot, that's fine. But I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't been through the process. But if someone was looking to me to go on stage, I'd be like, no. And I'm very careful to stay in my lane on that side of things. Like if someone's coming to me with an eating disorder, I'm doing a course in CBT at the minute, and that's to add another string to my bow. But I'll also stay in my lane and say, right, I can give you some small tools, but you also have to work alongside someone in this, and this also has to be a reason, and it also has to be it may not be the time to diet as well. And I've no problem saying that to clients in relation, this isn't the time to diet. Like I had one of the girls sign up with myself, and she's been on the podcast. One of my clients has been on the podcast, Una. She signed up to me to lose weight, and I was like, okay. And we started talking about doing on the onboarding call. We were talking about it or whatever, and she hadn't had a cycle in like 8 or 10 years. And I was like, okay, well, that's number one. And she was like, oh, why? And I was like, well, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. Your estrogen is going to have a massive impact on your bone health and your overall health. And if you want to have kids when you're older, that's completely her choice. I was never going to say you have to have kids, but osteoporosis, osteopenia, brittle bones, your overall health, you're going to struggle to walk when you're older. You're going to have arthritis. You're going to have all these things, or could have all these things, should I say. And she was like, okay, well then 100% we need to try this. But the biggest thing that I found was also there was a medical. So she lives over in New York. So she went over to a doctor over in New York, and he said, go on the pill. And I was like, right, that's not I warned her beforehand that he could say that. And she came out and rang me straight away. So Shane, you called this straight away. So, because if you're going on the pill, it's putting a mask, plaster over an issue if you have amenorrhea.
Yeah.
Her concern that we needed to work on was getting a little bit more fuel into our body and trying to reduce the exercise. That's what we need to try and do, which is not an easy thing to do for someone who was training a lot. But bringing in the fuel is kind of like, well, you're going to see PBs in the gym on those 4 days that you're training. And that was the way to phrase it. And I wouldn't have learned that if I hadn't listened to or surrounded myself with people who actually care, or read certain things, or listened to a podcast and hear a different way they phrase things. And I think I have no problem in saying to someone like, you're not potentially ready, or that you have a binge eating disorder like bulimia or anorexia. Now is the time to potentially go and talk to someone and try to address this. Will it be easy? Will you get bite back? Potentially. But I'm also like, I have to protect my brand. I have to protect me ethically, morally. I can only help so much. And I have no problem saying, well, I can do potentially 60%. But if you want the full package, the other 40% is going to be provided by someone else.
Wow. Yeah. Completely agree with that. Like kind of sometimes helping isn't helping hands-on, it's helping by delegating.
I think you have to leave. I think you have to be able to say, I may not be the best person for you. And I've no problem saying that to clients. And they're a bit surprised when they're kind of like, well, I've come to you for a reason. I'm like, yeah, but I think this coach will be better suited. And then they kind of ask and you explain it to them rather than saying, no, you're not for me. Yeah. It's not about that. It's not like a swipe left on Tinder or swipe right on Tinder. It's kind of like, we're not a match. Or if you're going for a body, if you're going up on stage, I'm definitely not the coach for you. Yeah, I know what to do from the nutrition point of view, But if you want to get proper lean and understand, and someone who understands the psychological impacts of going that lean and being able to manage, particularly for girls, the hormones at that level, well, then that's a very different story. I can understand from a psychological point of view, physiological point of view, but if it's someone who hasn't managed someone at that level, I would probably push them towards someone who has been at that level.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely Sam. I think that, yeah, I'm happy to almost let you go. So it's been all like kind of fairly kind of professional and coaching orientated right now, but I think people buy people, and the more that our listeners and our coaching clients can kind of get to know you and I, the more we start to kind of appeal to them. And like, Jesus, they're not just these super successful podcasters and coaches, they're actually like regular dudes at the same time. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions.
Oh God.
All right, 4 questions, and you just have to say underrated or overrated.
Okay.
Chicken wings.
Underrated.
Yes, thank you. All right. Barbell squat.
Overrated.
Highly.
There's like most people can't do them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be the greatest squatter in the world, but yeah, you can still do box squats, or you can still do other exercises to get to where you want to go. There's machines as well when the gyms are open.
Goblet squats, TRX squat.
Most people who are sitting at a desk all day, mobility isn't there to get proper depth. But depth can be and mobility can be worked on. But for most, I very rarely brought my clients over to a squat rack if they were not in a position to do so, and it's about understanding the client again.
Yeah, just to do bicep curls.
Exactly. Yeah.
Friends TV show.
Underrated.
No, it's overrated.
No, it's like Father Ted. It's underrated.
No, Father Ted is highly underrated. But
no, Friends. I could watch Friends all day. Friends and Scrubs are underrated.
Scrubs
got me through college.
Scrubs is who has 2 thumbs doesn't give a fuck.
This guy.
This guy. And I think that's fairly non-scale victories, underrated, overrated.
My business is based on them.
I know, so.
Yeah. So very, very underrated. I think when people hear it, they're like, "Oh, that's a gimmick." I'm like, "Nope."
No, it's not. It's powerful.
I think it's important to, like, if you've been from slimmer clubs, it's high five when you're down, tut when you're up, and I think that needs to be moved away. Like, you don't go into a shop looking for a size 70 kilos. You go into a shop looking for a certain size clothes, and even then, that's still putting a label on your happiness. And I guarantee, if you got down to, say, if you're like, I don't know what weight, 120 kilos, and you got down to 100 kilos, you may feel a little bit more empowered, but I guarantee you'll still want more. Like, you'll get to a point and you'll still want, you're like, the I'll be happy when syndrome comes in. And I remember listening to an article recently with, I think it was Mario Goetze, the guy who scored the winner for Germany.
Yes.
He scored the winner, happiest day of his life. He had that for 6 seconds, and then he was, for the rest of his career, or whatever his rest of his career has been, he's been chasing that high, and he's never managed to get to it. We'll always want something. When we reach a goal, we'll always want more. It's like, oh, I get a certain amount of listens on a podcast. Oh, I want more. You get it. You have that epiphany. You get that high, that adrenaline rush, or that epiphany for so long, but you always want more. That's just human nature, human intent. And you like, oh, I don't know, you hit a certain weight, you hit a PB, you're like, I want more. It's just a competitive nature. It's just the way the body works, the mind works.
And that's just something that kind of it's okay wanting more to a certain extent, because having ambition is a fantastic trait, but it's understanding where that starts to fall in with a negative trait and where it's starting to impede you.
Yeah, I think you also have to be able to say and look back and say, what do I need to get there? What steps do I have to put into place in order to get there? Because it's all well and good saying, oh, I want to bench press 100 kg. But if you're not going to work on your mobility on your wrists, or you're not going to work on mobility, or you're not going to work with proper form or take videos or do proper warm-ups, you're not really going to get there, or be able to say, right, I actually need to go back on my weights in order to go forward. Because I think a lot of people don't really want to do the unsexy stuff again.
The unsexy stuff is where it's at.
It is.
That's where it's at. Shano, let's end that one there, buddy.
Thank you, my man. Thank you very much for having me.
I'll list basically Shane's all of his information in below. So if anyone does want to go check him out, give him grief for thinking that Friends is an underrated TV show, by all means, crack on. And then if you are looking for online coaching, he is a top geezer and he gets fantastic results.
Thank you, Dean.
Cheers, bye.